Willie was always the odd one out in her family. She had 3 older siblings who were all superstars in their own way. Ben, her older brother, was a math genius who always had the highest grades. Lily, her sister, could do everything perfectly. She was a straight-A student, a winner of all the spelling bees and the teacher's favorite. Mark, her other brother, was the star athlete who could run faster and jump higher than anyone at school. They were perfect in everyone's eyes, and everyone noticed. But Willie always felt invisible. She wasn't good at math like Ben, or a top student like Lily, or an athlete like Mark. No matter how hard she tried, nothing seemed to make her stand out. At school, she was always overlooked, and sometimes the kids would even make fun of her. "Why can't you be like Ben?" one kid would say. "You'll never be as good as Lily," another would tease. Mark's friends would laugh and call her the lost sibling when she tried to join their games. It was as if no one cared about her, not even her family. But there was one thing Willie loved: music. She would spend hours in her room, listening to songs and dreaming about being a famous singer. But even her dreams seemed silly to her family. "Willie, you can't just sing your way to success," her dad would say. "Focus on your schoolwork," her mom would remind her. It wasn't just her family. At school, kids laughed when she hummed to herself or tapped rhythms on the desk. They would call her names, saying she wasn't good enough, that she would never amount to anything. "Look at you, Willie. You're always in the shadows," they would taunt. One day, after a particularly hard day at school, Willie came home feeling crushed. Her classmates had thrown papers at her during lunch, mocking the way she sang. She had tried to ignore them, but the words still hurt. When she got home, she didn't want to face her family. She knew they wouldn't understand. "I'm so dumb," Willie whispered to herself as she stared at the wall. "Why do I even try?" She sat in her room, alone, listening to the music that made her feel better. Willie pulled out the old guitar her brother Ben had left behind, the one that had been gathering dust in the corner of the room for years. She strummed the strings awkwardly at first, feeling unsure of herself. But as the melody began to take shape, she felt something deep inside her heart. Maybe she wasn't good at school or sports, but here, with the music, she felt alive. The next day at school, Willie was walking down the hall when she overheard some kids talking. "Did you hear? Willie's gonna try out for the school talent show," one of them snickered. "She'll probably mess it up. She's not good at anything." Willie's stomach sank. The last thing she wanted was to be humiliated in front of the whole school. But something inside her pushed her to do it anyway. She couldn't let their words control her anymore. She was going to show them. For weeks, Willie practiced in secret. When her family wasn't around, she would sing and play the guitar, pouring all her feelings into the music. It was the only place where she felt like she mattered, where she could escape the hurtful words and the feeling of being invisible. Finally, the day of the talent show arrived. Willie was nervous. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stood behind the curtain, waiting for her turn. The audience was full of students who had laughed at her before, and she knew they were all waiting to see her fail. Her hands shook as she stepped onto the stage. The bright lights were blinding, and for a moment, she almost turned around and ran. But then she remembered the hours she had spent practicing, the way the music made her feel. This was her chance to prove that she was more than what people thought of her. Willie took a deep breath, picked up the guitar, and began to play. At first, her voice was shaky, but as she continued, something magical happened. The more she sang, the more confident she became. She poured all her pain, all her dreams, into the song. It was a song about feeling invisible, about being bullied and misunderstood, but also about finding strength in the things that make you different. The crowd was silent at first, but as she reached the final notes, she saw something amazing happen. Some of the students who had laughed at her were now staring at her in awe. For the first time, Willie felt seen. She finished the song and looked up, holding her breath. The room was still. And then applause. A slow clap at first, but soon, everyone was cheering. Willie's heart soared. They hadn't laughed at her. They hadn't made fun of her. They were applauding her. After the show, Willie walked off the stage, feeling like a different person. She had faced her fears, and for the first time, she felt like she belonged. But as she made her way through the crowd, she overheard a conversation between a few of the popular kids. "Wow, I didn't know Willie could sing like that," one of them said. "Maybe she's not as useless as we thought." Another added, "Yeah, she's actually kind of cool." Willie's heart fluttered. They were talking about her in a way they never had before. It felt like a victory. But deep down, Willie knew that the real battle was just beginning. The next day at school, everyone started treating her differently. Her classmates who had once ignored her now wanted to be her friend. They asked her about her music, complimented her on her talent. Willie was confused. Why were they suddenly so interested in her? Was it because of the talent show? Was it because they now saw her as cool? She couldn't shake the feeling that some of them were only being nice because of the attention she was getting. It was hard for Willie to trust their kindness. Had they only paid attention to her now because she had something to offer? The bullying at school didn't stop completely. Some of the kids who used to make fun of her were now trying to be her friend. But Willie couldn't shake the feeling that they were only interested in her because she was becoming a star. It felt strange, almost like they were trying to take advantage of her newfound fame. Willie knew that her journey wasn't over. She had a long way to go before she would ever feel truly accepted by her family, her classmates, or even herself. But for now, one thing was certain. Stargirl was rising, and she wasn't going to let anyone push her back down again. As Willie's popularity started to rise, so did the whispers. At school, some of her classmates who had once ignored her were now pretending to be her friends. They smiled at her, asking for autographs or pictures, but Willie couldn't forget how they had treated her just a few weeks ago. It felt fake, like they were only interested in her because she had something they wanted. One day at lunch, as Willie was sitting with Sarah, her only real friend, a group of popular kids walked by. They laughed loudly, and one of them, Michelle, tossed a sneer at Willie. "Is it because you sang that one song that suddenly makes you think you're special, Willie?" Michelle sneered, crossing her arms. "You're still the same awkward girl from before. Just one lucky performance, and now you think you're a star? Please." Willie felt the sting of the words. She tried to ignore it, but the voices kept echoing in her mind. It wasn't just Michelle. A few others chimed in, adding to the cruel chorus. "Yeah, you're not even a real artist," said Jake, another student who had never paid her any attention before. "You don't even know how to write music. It's all just luck. You'll be forgotten once the next big thing comes along." Willie felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Why did they have to keep reminding her of how they had always treated her like nothing? She had worked so hard to get to where she was, and yet they refused to see it. It was like she was still invisible to them, despite her success. Sarah looked at Willie with a frown, noticing how upset she was. "Don't listen to them, Willie. They don't know what they're talking about. You have real talent." But Willie wasn't so sure. Every day, it felt like she was walking a tightrope, balancing between the people who believed in her and the people who just wanted to bring her down. The insults were getting louder, and the weight of it all was starting to wear on her. At home, things weren't much better. Her family, who had once ignored her dreams, now seemed to have a new opinion about her. Her siblings, who had always been the center of attention, were struggling to accept the shift in focus. They had been the ones praised for their achievements, But now it was Willie who was in the spotlight. One evening, after Willie had just returned from a radio interview, she sat down for dinner with her family. Her mom and dad were there, beaming with pride, but her siblings didn't seem as happy. Ben, who had always been the academic star of the family, sat quietly, poking at his food. "So, Willie," Ben said, finally breaking the silence, "I heard your song is getting a lot of attention. But don't get too full of yourself. You're not the only one with a talent, you know. Just because you sang one good song doesn't mean you're going to make it big." Willie's heart sank. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Ben rolled his eyes. "Come on, you're not even a real musician. Anyone can sing a song and get lucky. But true success? That takes more than a few performances." Mark, her older brother who had always been obsessed with sports, added, "Yeah, don't get too excited. People will forget you the moment someone better comes along. You're not as special as you think." Willie felt her stomach twist. It was as though no matter what she did, she couldn't win. Even her family, who she had hoped would understand, seemed to think her success was just a fluke. Their words stung more than anything the kids at school had said. They should have been the ones to lift her up. But instead, it felt like they were trying to tear her down, too. "Why can't you just be proud of me?" Willie asked, her voice trembling with frustration. "I worked so hard for this. This isn't just luck." Her parents looked at each other, exchanging uneasy glances. "We are proud of you, Willie," her mom said softly, but Willie could hear the doubt in her voice. "But we just don't want you to get hurt. It's a tough world out there, and not everyone is going to love your music." Willie felt the tears welling up in her eyes, but she fought them back. She didn't want to seem weak, not now, not when she was finally standing up for herself. "I don't need anyone to love my music. I'm doing this for me." But even as the words left her mouth, she wasn't sure if she believed them. Was she really doing this for herself? Or was she just trying to prove something to everyone who had doubted her? The next day at school, the insults continued. A group of students who had once ignored her were now mocking her. They would whisper as she passed by, calling her wannabe star or fake artist. Some even dared to say, "You'll never make it. You'll be a joke in a year." One of the boys, Daniel, who had always been friendly with Willie before her rise to fame, leaned in as she walked past him. "Are you really going to let all these people hype you up? You know they only care because you're getting attention. You're just a one-hit wonder. The minute you slip up, they'll turn their backs on you." Willie felt her heart drop to her stomach. She had heard the words before, but hearing them again stung all the same. It was like they were all waiting for her to fail. The more Willie thought about it, the more she began to doubt herself. Was Michelle right? Was she just a girl who got lucky? Was it all just a fluke? She had never been popular, never been the center of attention. And now, she was supposed to believe that she was meant for greatness? But deep down, she knew one thing. She couldn't let these words stop her. No matter what they said, she had worked hard to get here. She had fought for every moment in the spotlight, and she couldn't let the insults tear her apart. Stargirl wasn't going to let them win. Days passed, and the insults didn't stop. They seemed to grow louder, more frequent, and more hurtful with every day that Willie walked through the halls of her school. Every time she turned on the radio and heard her song playing, a part of her felt proud, but another part felt like a fraud. The kids at school, the people who had mocked her, seemed to be waiting for her to fail. They laughed and whispered, saying her success would be short-lived. Even at home, Willie felt the weight of her family's doubts. She would hear her siblings talking behind her back, wondering if she was just another fleeting star. They didn't see the long hours she put into her music. They didn't see the lonely nights she spent writing and practicing, trying to make something of herself. They didn't know what it was like to be ignored and bullied, only to rise above it and find a place where she could be herself. But Willie wasn't going to give up. She couldn't. One morning, after yet another cruel comment from Michelle at school, Willie felt like she might break. She locked herself in her room and stared out the window, wondering if all of this was worth it. The pain of the insults was getting harder to bear, and the pressure of her family's expectations weighed on her heart. But then she thought about her song. She remembered how she had written it, how it came from the deepest part of her. Her struggles, her dreams, and her pain. It wasn't just a song. It was her story. And if people couldn't see that, then maybe they weren't meant to understand her journey. Willie sat at her guitar, her fingers trembling as she strummed the strings. She closed her eyes and sang softly to herself. Her voice was shaky at first, but the more she sang, the stronger it became. She wasn't singing for anyone but herself now. The world could judge her all they wanted, but she knew who she was. That night, something incredible happened. Her song started to play on the radio more often. People began to talk about it. At first, it was just a few whispers here and there, but soon it spread like wildfire. The song was everywhere, on the radio, in stores and cafes. People were downloading it, sharing it, and playing it on repeat. And then, one morning, Willie's phone rang. It was the record label she had been in contact with for months, the one she had almost given up on. "We want to sign you," they said. "Your song is taking off. You're the real deal, Willie." The call left her speechless. Could this really be happening? Could she really become the artist she had always dreamed of? Days turned into weeks, and Willie's career skyrocketed. She began to perform in bigger venues, her songs topping the charts, and people everywhere were talking about her. Her family, who had once doubted her, now couldn't stop praising her. They saw her not as the girl who had struggled, but as the star they had always wanted her to be. Her parents couldn't believe it. She had done it. She had proven them all wrong. Her siblings, too, started to change. Ben, the academic genius, came to her concert and hugged her tightly. "I'm sorry, Willie," he said. "I didn't believe in you, but now I see. You're not just lucky. You're amazing." Mark, her sporty brother, was the next to apologize. "You're the real champion in this family, Willie," he said, beaming with pride. "I've been telling all my friends about you. You're a legend now." But the most powerful moment came when Willie returned home after a huge concert in another city. Her parents were waiting for her with smiles and open arms. Her dad, who had once told her to focus on school instead of her music, wrapped her in a hug. "You've made us proud, Willie," he said softly. "You've shown us all what it means to follow your dreams. We're sorry we ever doubted you." Willie smiled through the tears, feeling the weight of their words settle into her heart. She had finally done it. She had proven that she wasn't just the forgotten sibling, the one who was always in the shadows. She was Stargirl. The world was listening to her now. Her songs were being played in cities all over the world. She was performing for thousands of people, her name known from one country to the next. Willie's voice, once dismissed and ignored, was now heard everywhere. But despite her success, there was one thing Willie knew for sure. The road to this moment had been anything but easy. She had faced doubt, criticism, and hatred from those closest to her and the world around her. But it was all worth it because she had believed in herself. She had never given up, even when everything seemed impossible. Now, when Willie walked down the street, people no longer ignored her. They smiled, waved, and asked for pictures. Her song played in stores, at parties, and on the radio. She was no longer the girl hiding in the shadows. She was a star, and for the first time, Willie truly felt like she belonged. The pain of the past was still there, but it was no longer in control. She had overcome it all, and she had become something even bigger than she had ever dreamed.